I really don't know if I bought this new Nike Pegasus 39 because of nostalgia, tradition. Years ago, the Pegasus was one of the earliest shoes that I ran in. And before I started switching up my shoes, I used to run everything in the Pegasus. But a lot has changed since then. There are loads of good companies out there that produce brilliant running shoes. And yet I still found myself looking forward to the Nike Pegasus 39. But first off, I gotta say, it does look a bit boring, doesn't it? But let's not be all shallow and judge this shoe by its looks. Because there's a reason that this is the 39th iteration of the Nike Pegasus. Okay, so just so you know, Nike updates their Pegasus every 2 years. Well, they update it every year, but every 2 years, it's a big update. The Nike Pegasus 39 is the year of the big update. We're gonna get into all of that. And just so you know, before making this video, I actually put this shoe through its paces. In fact, as soon as I took this out of the box, I went out and I ran a 15-mile run, which is about 24 kilometers. And since then, I have tested it out on all the different types of runs. I've run a tempo pace, I've run intervals. Obviously, in my first run, I took that out for hours. So I've got a pretty good idea what the Nike Pegasus 39 is all about. Now, I will check back in and give you a long-term review to see if anything does change over time. But for now, I think this is going to be a pretty good review. So the first thing that has changed with the Nike Pegasus 39 is the price. Nike has increased the price by $10. Last year, it was $120. The Nike Pegasus 39 is now $130. It's 110 pounds in the UK. Okay, we can let that slide. I think $130 still represents very good value, and I'll explain why as we go forward. Of course, it would be silly not to expect price increases every once in a while. The Nike Pegasus has been $120 for quite a while. So one of the biggest changes that Nike has made this year with the Pegasus 39 is the weight. Surprisingly enough, they were able to reduce the weight. And this year, in the men's US size 9, the Pegasus weighs in at 9.4 ounces or 266 grams. However, in my size, a US men's size 13, the weight obviously goes up a little bit. My size weighs in at 11.2 ounces or 317 grams. Pretty good, especially when you consider that last year my Pegasus 38 weighed in at 12.8 ounces or 362 grams. So that means that in my size, my Pegasus has lost 12.4% of its weight. That's not nothing. However, I do live in Florida, and because it is the summertime here in Florida, I tend to sweat quite a bit when I'm out for my run. So when I got done with that 15-mile run, my first run, I came home, I put it immediately on the scale. And the Pegasus 39 had increased its weight from 11.2 ounces or 317 grams to 12.3 ounces or 350 grams. That's a 10.4% increase just from sweat. Luckily, sweat evaporates, so as I hold this talking to you, it is back down to its starting weight. But that percentage increase should just give you a vague idea of how much this shoe holds on to liquid, which means there's quite a bit of material. Now, Nike has improved their upper this year, and it definitely doesn't feel as warm as it did last year. However, it isn't the most ventilated shoe. And I'm saying that very tongue-in-cheek, it is not a ventilated shoe at all. Not that my foot was feeling warm, but I just noticed that it wasn't feeling airy. Does that make sense? However, compared with last year on the Pegasus 38, I think there was some improvement, although maybe that improvement wasn't noticeable when my foot was in the shoe. It just feels a little different when I'm feeling the upper. Now, the Nike Pegasus 39 does retain its 10mm drop, and you're probably going to see a couple different numbers when you check the stack heights. It's either going to be 28mm in the heel with 18 in the forefoot or 33mm in the heel with 23 in the forefoot. And I think that difference is depending on how they measure the stack height. So my guess is that the 33 in the heel and 23 in the forefoot is measured with the insole and the outsole rubber. Okay, so now we know the weight and the specs. Two pretty important things when we're considering a shoe. Let's start at the top and work our way down. Now this year, it seems that Nike has included a little more of a heel flare right here in the back, but the cushioning around the heel collar remains pretty much the same. There is plenty of cushioning, and I found my heel was nicely cupped. The heel counter is very secure, and I didn't experience any heel slip. And with that being said, I didn't experience any heel slip in the Pegasus 38 either. So whatever they were doing before, it's still working for me. Now Nike claims that they are putting a little extra padding in the tongue. But when I've compared the 39 with the 38, the tongue's thickness or paddingness seems very similar. However, what they have changed with the tongue is the shape of the tongue. And the tongue's shape is kind of like an asymmetrical pattern. Obviously, so it helps relieve the pressure from the tongue hitting on the top of your foot, where the top of your foot turns into your ankle. That part of the body called something. Nike claims that the tongue is separated from the upper to give more room for different foot shapes. I don't know what I think about that. I also don't know what I think about saying that it's separated from the upper when actually it is connected to the internal part of the upper. It's almost very booty-ish. When you look in, the tongue is connected to the interior of the shoe. And it's this part of the shoe that maintains the shoe's warmth. It stops it from being very ventilated. So you can see in this colorway, it almost looks like a translucent top. But when you slide your hand in like this, I would think I'd be able to see my fingers wiggling about inside, and that's not the case because it's a dual layer. So even though the top layer looks translucent, the inside layer is just a little thicker. And you might think, well, Matt, is it a good thing that it's keeping your foot warm? I haven't really noticed that my foot is uncomfortably warm. It's more that I don't notice that my foot is cool. But on the other side of the coin, the Pegasus 39's upper is made to be very resilient. And this contributes to the shoe lasting for such a long time. And we'll talk about longevity in just a second when we get to the outsole. The laces themselves are very similar to last year's Pegasus. I haven't experienced any trouble with the laces, but what has changed is that Nike is now using the flywire system again. Remember, they stopped that on the Nike Pegasus 36. On the 37 and the 38, they had almost like thicker bands holding the laces in. And now they've gone back to the flywire. And this is probably where a lot of the weight savings comes from, because we're saving a lot of material by using just this wire filament. You can see it coming down here. And there's actually a piece of material right here in the middle, this mid-layer band that contributes to the overall midfoot lockdown. Now, I can't say that the Pegasus has ever suffered, in my opinion, for having a poor midfoot lockdown, but the great thing is the Pegasus 39 fits just as well as its predecessors. We have just a couple overlays on the outside, the Nike swoosh, a solid one on this side, kind of hollowed out swoosh on this side, and I do want to show you one thing. On my first run, I did notice this happening. Can you see it? Can I get it just a little closer so you can see? The swoosh is just peeling right off. I've never had that kind of quality issue with any Nike shoe in the past, and I hate to even bring it up because it's not really that big of a deal. I can just put a dab of glue on it, stick it back down, but still, something you should know. Overall, the build quality of the Nike Pegasus line, especially the 39, it feels very high quality. Premium? I don't know, premium's the right word, but it feels like it's put together well, you know what I'm saying? All right, we're dropping down to the midsole, and Nike is using a full-length React foam. No change there. They've used React foam in the Pegasus line for the last couple of years, but what has changed from last year is that Nike is now including 2 air zoom units. So you remember, last year we had the Pegasus 38 with a 4-foot air zoom unit. This year in the Pegasus 39, we have a heel air zoom unit also. So that's double the air zoom. It's got to mean something, right? Now, these air zoom units are actually pretty small. When you see them next to the rest of the shoe, it isn't filling up the entire heel. But even so, air obviously weighs less than foam, and that's another reason that Nike has been able to drop the weight on the Pegasus 39. And we'll talk about how the air zoom units feel in just a second. But hold on, let's get down to the outsole. There's a few changes on the outsole. Although the lug pattern seems very familiar, it's very easy to show you guys and tell you because of the colors of the different rubber. But this rubber on the heel running up the lateral side of the shoe, this is carbon rubber, and then we have blown rubber in the forefoot. And look, I want to draw your attention to something on here. Let me see if I can touch the shoe to show you. Okay, so on these tiny little lugs, there are like little bumps, little nipples on the edge of the rubber. And I'm not quite sure why they were put there. I would think it has something to do with grip, maybe. But I gotta tell you guys that in just the 50K or so that I've put into this shoe, those little nodules have worn away totally on my forefoot. So if they were put there to increase grip, that extra grip was very short-lived. However, Nike is clearly onto something, and I don't want you to think that these shoes are not going to last you because that little bit of rubber that was sticking out wears down. This outsole rubber has been tried and true by me personally, and you will get, I don't know, I would say you'd get as many miles as you want to put into this shoe. The Nike Pegasus 38 was the shoe that I ran the most miles in last year. It was something like 560 miles in that shoe, and the outsole rubber on my Pegasus 38 looks fantastic. The outsole on this, the Pegasus 39, looks very similar. Nike's just tweaked it just a little bit, and you can see these 2 flex screws running across the forefoot, which just makes the Pegasus 39 just a little more flexible when you're bending it. Not that anyone but shoe tubers actually bend their shoes like this, but if you wanted to do it, you could, because Nike's included those flex screws. Let's first talk about aesthetics, then let's talk about ride. Because overall, I think the Nike Pegasus 39 is a fairly uninspired design. Now look, I'm not saying that I could do any better, I certainly couldn't, but I just think the Pegasus 39 looks a bit boring. But if you have seen any of my other videos on some of the other boring shoes that I've reviewed, you know that boring isn't always a bad thing. Boring is the bread and butter. Boring is the majority of the miles that we put into our shoes. And even though this may not look like a rocket ship, it performs exceedingly well. And that boring and that build quality come together to make a shoe that is going to last you a long time. Okay, now we're on to ride. And much like the aesthetics of the Pegasus 39, I found it to be fairly uninspired. Okay, maybe that's a little harsh. So if there's a continuum of super responsive and a total dud, the Nike Pegasus 39 is squarely in the middle. Yeah, there is a little bit of responsiveness to this shoe, but I don't want anyone buying the Nike Pegasus 39 and thinking it's going to feel like a carbon plated shoe. It's not. But even though I wouldn't give the Nike Pegasus 39 a 10 out of 10 for responsiveness, I would give it a 10 out of 10 for comfort. And I think that is the best thing about the Nike Pegasus 39. It is a very comfortable shoe to put on. It's a very comfortable shoe to run in. It's a very comfortable shoe to walk in. And even though I am only going to use this as a running shoe, except maybe a year from now when it gets retired to a walk-in shoe, I think that if you needed a shoe for work, if you needed a running shoe that you just wanted to wear for everyday activities, I think the Pegasus 39 would fit that bill too. Now you already know that I have run long and slow, I've picked up the pace, I've kind of done everything that us runners do on a weekly basis in the shoe. And again, it performs very well across the board. If you do have a race day shoe, then obviously you're going to be wearing that shoe to race in. But if you're watching this and you're looking for one shoe that kind of does it all, the Nike Pegasus 39, definitely worth a look. Nike knows what they're making. They call this the workhorse with wings. That's exactly what it is. Not the wings part, but it is a workhorse. You can get a lot of use out of the Pegasus 39. Oh guys, if you did like this review, if you like the look of the Pegasus 39, or if you don't like the look of the Pegasus 39, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you're not already. It really helps me and helps the channel out. So in summary, the Nike Pegasus 39 is a good all-rounder. I think the value comes in its durability and its price. I think $130 for this shoe represents exceptional value. Well, maybe not exceptional value, but it's good value still. And if you wait just a little longer and you can get it any cheaper than $130, well then you're laughing all the way to the bank. The Nike Pegasus 39 might not be the most exciting shoe you can buy, but if you only had this shoe, it'll take you a long way. Alright guys, thanks for staying all the way to the end of the video. Be kind, be happy, run well. I'll see you in a couple of days.